Hey there folks, welcome back to the Gunners Guild, where we're still going over Mycopunk builds. Sadly, since I haven't found all the upgrades yet, I just got 2 more I wanted to add on my Ignition Wrangler build, so that's a shame, since I'll have to update that build already. But speaking of updates, Mycopunk has another update and seems to be getting them very frequently, so maybe I'll wait to update that since weapons could change in the near future. Like the Carver did get its nerf, so thankfully there's that. Anyway, a lot of stuff on the horizon, I'm sure, so let me get these builds out before they get changed and I have to redo all these videos already. So in today's video, we're going to be covering another elemental themed build, which is going to be the Bolt Bruiser. It's a shock themed bruiser build that just electrocutes everything and sends lightning bolts flying in all directions. As I mentioned in my previous video, but all my builds are going to be handling level 6 high intensity swarms just fine, solo or co-op. Actually, I don't think this build has any swaps between the two, which is great. And it also doesn't include any like OP busted equipment like the Carver or Merv Glider, but thankfully since the Carver got nerfed, I expect Merv Glider to get nerfed as well soon. So I personally don't like to use things like that are bugged or can be exploited or kind of cheapen the gameplay, so I avoid that stuff where possible. But anyway, let's get into the breakdown. Like the Fire Wrangler build, we have a lot of synergies, so the equipment will play together very well, and we're going to have to look at each individual piece to kind of see the bigger picture. In this video, we're going to start by going over the Bruiser class since it's the main focus of this build, whereas like the Fire Grenade was the main in the previous video with the Ignition Wrangler. So in the Bruiser upgrades, the main key here is going to be using the Lightning Dive exotic upgrade that lets us slam into the ground with our nosedive skill and release bolts of lightning to nearby enemies when we slam, which will obviously electrocute them, and so we're going to be focusing around building our nosedive slam. So the second exotic perk we're going to be using is For Good Measure to get a second slam, and then we have the Nose Bounce perk to get 2 additional nosedives in chain, so that whenever we use our nosedive skill, we get 3 total slams, each of which will release 12 bolts of lightning, causing massive AoE damage to everything, and pretty much keeping us relatively safe in the process because we're going to be up and down a lot. And then we're going to have Shock Affinity to help apply more shocks, Elemental Cocktail to give us a chance to ignite everything we shock for double dots, and a really important upgrade, Unconditional Protector, to grant us an overshield whenever we use our barrier skill, which is the only form of kind of pseudo healing we have, so it's very important to have here on this tree. Focus Prism and Elemental Health here are optional. We will be shocking ourselves quite a lot, so the extra shock damage and healing when it's done does help, but it's not a major factor here. You could also use like shock resistance or bubble on nosedives, because those are fine alternatives too. But this is the core of the build. We're building around the Bruiser's nosedive. And so moving on, let's go over to the Shock Grenade, another huge core to this build. So for the upgrades, we have High Voltage to increase our outgoing shock damage, so basically everything we do. Marathon to increase our move speed by 30% while their grenade is on cooldown. This is a big defensive layer, as movement is literally your best defense in this game. And Gorge here is for huge blast radius increases. And then we have Live Wire, the exotic perk, to make us the grenade, which will have the grenade explode on us rather than be thrown. Now this has 2 special features that I need to talk about for this exotic. First is that it makes the grenade use instant, meaning that there's no throw animation, so you can activate the grenade in the middle of shooting or using nosedive. The other aspect of the grenade is that it will be placed on us, which keeps us shocked, and it's going to keep hitting us. So try not to kill yourself with a shock grenade, but this is what's going to keep us shocked basically the entire time. So things like, our Prism from our Bruiser will just basically give us 20% damage all the time. We have insulated gloves here to reduce our self-damage taken, and we also have excited plasma, and it's kind of optional though. It causes grenades that hit ignited enemies to get a secondary explosion, and since we can ignite when we shock, this does get used, it's just not super important. We have stun here to give us a safety net, as we're pretty much always going to try to have the grenade active and stunning enemies around us. It makes the nosedive safer to use, as we'll have enemies stunned nearby when we land, assuming the grenade is active. And then lastly, we're going to have Funnel, a major important mod here. Grenade energy gets recharged when we shock enemies. So whenever we make a nosedive and spread our lightning around, we're going to be replenishing our grenade energy and keeping our grenade active. Which is kind of how these things are going to be playing hand in hand. We're going to be using nosedive a lot, which is going to help fuel our grenade, and so we're always going to have the grenade active, and so we're having shocks and stuns around us so that we're not going to be anywhere near enemies when we land, hopefully. And so now let's go over to the main weapon here, which is going to be my favorite weapon, the plate launcher. Plate Launcher has excellent range and AoE damage, which shreds abomination limbs and groups of enemies very well. For its upgrades, we have weight rebalance for more damage but slower plates, which will be important later. Pull alignment so plates recoil faster, which lets us fire more often. This is basically our reload speed. Electrified plates to give us shocks on hit, which will also replenish our grenade energy now. Every time we hit stuff, we're going to be getting more energy back. Auto demolition, so the plates automatically recoil when shot. Just saves us a button pressing, and plate management, just some QOL there. We have compressed plate storage exotic to give us 4 plates to throw instead of 1. We have charged recycling, which is another huge key to this build. This is going to let us recharge our nosedive skill whenever we electrocute enemies, so the plate launcher can now recharge both our grenade and our nosedive on hit, which is amazing. We then have shish kebab for pierce on the plates, and this is great for hitting a lot of enemies, but does prevent us from getting the most out of some of our other plate perks that affect the plates when they land or get recalled, because they're not really going to be, attached to enemies or on the ground near enemies. And then the best exotic perk in the game, clearing plasma, which is going to give the plates huge spinning blades. So this is going to greatly increase its AoE size, giving us more damage and shocks. And this is the reason why we want slower plate speeds, because of this exotic. Because the blades aren't going to hit enemies if the plates are moving too fast and just going right through enemies. They're not going to have enough time to do the rotation on the blade. So we actually want that weight rebalance upgrade to slow them down to make sure we're getting more hits in. And if you try using this and you have really fast, discharge of your plates, you might notice it doesn't do anything. You gotta slow it down. Lastly, we have the bee call upgrade, which applies bees on impact. But since we have pierce, we're really not gonna be hitting stuff very well, so we're not gonna get a whole lot of bees out of this. It's only gonna be really useful when you aim at the ground. It's still a good upgrade, but we're just not getting a ton of mileage out of it because we have pierce. Now the plate thrower is our main weapon, and no other weapon will really help this build as much as this one does, so we're going to try using it for almost all our situations and kind of only swap off when we need to recharge it. It's perfect for just about everything. That being said, our last weapon slot here, it's going to be dealer's choice. Carver works well, but anything that can shock is going to help the build out. I'll be using the DMLR as my secondary for 2 reasons. The first is that it has infinite ammo, and the second is that it can take out shield generators at basically any range, and the laser is also very precise, so we can take out some pesky enemies from afar with really good precision. So the upgrades here are going to be hot swap exotic to make the laser the primary fire, so we're using that instead of using the DMR part of it, and we're going to be focusing basically entirely on laser usage. And this is kind of the reason why we have infinite ammo. And then we're going to have the arc lightning exotic as well, which is going to have our laser chain lightning between enemies, and this will cause electrocutes and refilling our grenades, and going to cause ignites as well. Just a nice little rounding out to get some little bit of AoE clear on it. And then photon surge here is to increase our movement speed while we use the laser, which is great because, like I said, speed's a good defensive option and it's really handy to have. Coronal ejector is going to provide us with a lot of laser damage, making it tick for 160 damage instead of 36. So it's good to clear little enemies with, especially with the chain lightning, but it's also going to be making us able to blow off parts from extreme range with that extra damage, which is how we're going to be doing the shield generators in short periods of time. Hard light bypass is what's going to allow us to penetrate those shields and kill those shield generators and snipers with their own little personal shields, and this is the main reason why I have the DMLR. It's a good fallback weapon to pick off those pesky enemies from really far ranges, and then let me swap back to the plate launcher once the shields are down and those plates can fly through them. Kinetic impossibility isn't necessary on this build, but it does allow us to float when we use the laser, which can be good to get away from the grunt enemies while we laser down larger ones, as we could just float outside their melee range. And then lastly, we're going to have shocking laser to make the laser deal shock damage by default, which is good because it's going to boost our damage and give us more shocks for our grenade and just help spread more shocks and ignites for clear. And so that's all the equipment and stuff for this build, and from the clips you can see the general playstyle. It's a lot of ground slams to deal with all the grunt enemies, followed by some plate launcher to hack away at the larger ones from afar. Shock grenade is going to be pressed as much as possible to keep stunning AoEs around us, which is going to help keep us safe, I hope. I actually don't know if the stuns are working, as it's kind of hard to see, but I'm going to assume that it does, or will be fixed if it doesn't. The main issue with this build is that we don't have any real forms of healing besides our barrier, which is only going to provide us with a pseudo shield. So the main way to heal is actually going to be looking for health orbs as we're in the air and slamming down on enemies to try to land near the orbs and pick those up right away. And to be honest, it turns out okay for the most part, because most of my deaths tend to come from the ground pound on like a barrel or exploding enemy on accident, as typically like you just can't see the warning signs when you're high up in the air, and then you just come right down as soon as they explode, and that's going to get you. But otherwise it's pretty safe, and you can pick up heals and stuff just fine, and you're getting around really fast because your grenade's always on cooldown. And so yeah, otherwise it's pretty safe, and it's got great movement speed and a lot of nosedive movement, so I love it. And that's kind of the Bolt Bruiser. It's a shock-based Bruiser setup that fuels its electrocutions into energy for nosedives and grenades. And of course, maybe I'll find more upgrades I want to use for this build in the coming days, but for now, it's pretty solid, and I don't expect it to get any nerfs, so if anything, it can only really get better. And yeah, so that's going to be all for me. Thank you all for watching. I hope I could inspire some people to try different equipment combinations at least. But yeah, peace and good luck out there.